My parents took out $170,000 loan in my name to fund my twin brother's modeling career, so I investigated it, and what I discovered about their financial crimes shocked everyone. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Growing up as a twin meant constant comparison. But I never imagined it would lead to financial destruction. Evan got the looks, the charm, the endless support for his modeling dreams. I got the grades, the responsibility, and apparently, the credit score worth destroying. The first sign appeared during my senior year of college. Credit monitoring alerts started flooding my phone. New accounts, credit inquiries, loan applications. When I called the bank, they congratulated me on my approval for a substantial personal loan. I never applied for any loan, I told the representative. Sir, we have your signature right here, along with employment verification and income documentation. My blood turned ice cold. Someone had stolen my identity, and given my family's recent obsession with funding Evan's expensive headshots, designer clothes, and Los Angeles apartment. I had my suspicions. That weekend, I drove home from college with my laptop and a plan. During dinner, I watched Evan show off photos from his latest modeling shoot, professional quality images that cost thousands of dollars. When my parents praised his investment in his future, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Instead, I slipped into my father's home office. His computer was logged in, browser tabs still open to banking websites. My hands shook as I navigated to the loan section. There it was, a $170,000 personal loan in my name. Approved 3 months ago. The monthly payment was $850. Due in 5 days. I took screenshots with my phone, my heart pounding with each click. The employment information listed me as working for my father's consulting firm, a job I'd never had. The income showed $65,000 annually, despite being a full-time student. Footsteps approached the office. I closed the browser and pretended to look for paper when my father appeared. What are you doing in here, Jake? Looking for printer paper for my resume. I lied. Career fair next week. He watched me carefully. Next time, ask first. That night in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the screenshots until my eyes burned. My own parents had committed federal identity theft to fund my brother's dreams. The loan payments would destroy my credit and financial future before it even began. The next morning, I confronted them directly during breakfast. Evan was still asleep. His modeling schedule meant late nights and even later mornings. I know about the loan, I said, setting my phone on the kitchen table showing the bank website. My mother's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. My father's newspaper crinkled as his grip tightened. What loan? My mother asked. The $170,000 personal loan you took out in my name to pay for Evan's modeling career. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. Then my father laughed, actually laughed. Jake, that's ridiculous. Why would we need to take out a loan? We've been supporting Evan with our own money. I have proof. I saw it on your computer last night. My mother reached over and patted my hand. Honey, you're stressed about graduation. Maybe you're seeing things that aren't there. I'm not imagining federal banking documents. My father folded his newspaper with deliberate precision. Son, I think you need to focus on your own future, instead of making wild accusations about your family. We've never taken out any loans in your name. Check your credit report then. I said, right now, I don't need to prove anything to you, he replied. You're living under our roof, eating our food, and accusing us of crimes. Maybe it's time you found somewhere else to stay while you work through these delusions. The word delusions hit like a physical blow. They weren't just denying it, they were making me question my own sanity. I learned something crucial that morning: when your parents are the criminals, reporting to them is useless. They'll gaslight you into believing your own evidence is fake. Back at college, I spent the next week gathering documentation. I downloaded my complete credit report, printed bank statements, and documented every fraudulent account. The evidence was overwhelming: 7 credit cards, 2 personal loans, and a car loan I'd never heard of. The total debt in my name exceeded $200,000. My credit score had plummeted from excellent to terrible in 6 months. I drove home the following weekend with a folder of evidence and a plan to confront them systematically. This time, I'd have everything documented. Saturday morning, I waited until they left for grocery shopping, then accessed my father's office again. I needed the original loan documents with my forged signature. The filing cabinet was locked. I found the key in his desk drawer, the same hiding spot he'd used since I was 10. Inside were folders labeled with financial categories: house, investments, business, and one labeled Evan career. The Evan folder contained bank statements, expense reports, and contracts for modeling agencies. At the bottom were loan origination documents with my name, my social security number, and a signature that looked like mine, but felt wrong somehow. I photographed everything, hands shaking with each shot. The expense reports detailed thousands of dollars for photography, wardrobes, travel, and apartment deposits. Every expense was funded by loans in my name. I was replacing documents when I heard car doors slam outside. They were home early. I shoved everything back, locked the cabinet, and replaced the key. Racing upstairs, I dove into my childhood bedroom just as the front door opened. "Jake," my mother called. "Are you here?" "Yeah, just studying," I called back. That afternoon, I presented my evidence at dinner. Printed pages spread across the dining table like crime scene photos. "This is everything," I said. "Loan documents, credit reports, bank statements. You stole my identity and destroyed my credit." My parents examined the documents with expressions I couldn't read. My father picked up a bank statement and frowned. "This account number doesn't match our records," he said. I looked closer. The account number was different from what I'd photographed. "That's impossible. I took this directly from your files." "Jake," my mother said gently, "these appear to be fabricated. The formatting is wrong, and this account doesn't exist." My stomach dropped. I pulled out my phone to show the original photos, but they were gone. Every screenshot I'd taken had mysteriously disappeared. "I had photos," I said weakly. "I took photos of the real documents." "Maybe you should talk to someone," my father suggested. "This level of paranoia isn't healthy." I learned that evidence means nothing if it can disappear. They had somehow deleted my photos and replaced the documents with fake ones. The criminals were always one step ahead. Desperate for allies, I reached out to my extended family. My uncle David had always been protective of me, and my grandmother Patricia had a sharp mind for financial matters. If anyone would believe me, it would be them. I invited myself to Sunday dinner at my grandparents' house, where the whole family gathered monthly. My parents attended reluctantly, probably sensing my plan. After dinner, while the adults sat in the living room, I made my case. "I need to tell everyone something important about my parents," I began. "They've been taking out loans and credit cards in my name to fund Evan's modeling career." The room went silent. 14 family members stared at me with expressions ranging from surprise to concern. "That's a serious accusation," my uncle David said carefully. "I have evidence," I replied, though my voice lacked conviction after the previous week's disaster. My father spoke calmly. "Jake has been struggling with some mental health issues since college stress intensified. He's been having paranoid episodes and making false accusations." "That's not true," I protested. My mother nodded sadly. "We've been trying to get him help, but he refuses treatment." Tonight is a perfect example of how these delusions manifest. My grandmother Patricia leaned forward. "Jake, honey, your parents love you and Evan equally. They would never hurt you financially." "But the loans?" "What loans?" my uncle David asked. "Your father just paid for Evan's career expenses from his business account." I helped with the paperwork myself. I looked around the room. Every adult face showed the same expression: concern for my mental health, not anger at my parents' crimes. "You're all protecting them," I whispered. "We're protecting you," my grandmother said, "from yourself." That night, I learned that family loyalty trumps evidence every time. They would rather believe I was mentally ill than accept that my parents were criminals. The golden child narrative was too powerful to break. Back at college, I made a decision that would change everything. If my family wouldn't help, I'd build my case alone. I started researching identity theft laws, forensic accounting, and private investigation techniques. My girlfriend Rachel noticed my obsession immediately. "You're spending every free hour researching fraud investigation," she said during lunch. "Maybe you should talk to campus counseling." "Everyone thinks I'm crazy," I replied, "but I know what I saw, then prove it properly. Get professionals involved." She was right. Amateur evidence gathering wasn't enough against sophisticated criminals. I needed expert help. I scheduled an appointment with the campus legal aid clinic. The student attorney, Sarah Chen, listened to my story with professional skepticism. "Identity theft by family members is unfortunately common," she said, "but prosecution is difficult because victims often can't prove they didn't give consent." "How do I prove I didn't give consent?" "Professional forensic analysis of the signatures, independent documentation of your whereabouts when applications were submitted, and expert financial investigation." She gave me contact information for a private investigator who specialized in family financial crimes. Marcus Webb. "He's expensive but thorough." Marcus Webb's office was located in a strip mall between a tax preparation service and a bail bondsman. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Family financial fraud cases are the hardest to prove," he said after reviewing my limited evidence. "But they're also the most satisfying to solve. Your parents made mistakes, they always do." "What kind of mistakes?" "Digital footprints. Banking regulations require documentation for everything. If they forged your signature, we can prove it. If they used your social security number illegally, there's a paper trail." His retainer was $3,000, money I didn't have. But Rachel surprised me. "I've been saving for a summer trip to Europe," she said. "This is more important." With professional help hired, I felt hope for the first time in weeks. Marcus Webb's investigation plan required accessing my parents' complete financial records, which meant another infiltration of their home office, this time with professional equipment. "I need you to install this software on their computer," Marcus explained, handing me a USB drive. "It will create a complete backup of their hard drive. Also, photograph any physical documents in their files. What if they catch me? Then we lose our best opportunity for evidence. But if you succeed, we'll have everything we need for prosecution." I waited for the perfect opportunity. My parents were attending Evan's modeling showcase in downtown Los Angeles, a 3-hour event plus travel time. They'd left at 5 p.m., giving me a 6-hour window. The house felt different when empty. Every shadow seemed to hide cameras. Every creak suggested footsteps. I made it to the office and started with their computer. The USB software installation took 12 minutes. While it worked, I photographed every document in the filing cabinet. This time, I found the real loan paperwork documents with my forged signature that looked professional but felt wrong under close examination. I also discovered something worse: applications for additional loans totaling another $50,000. They weren't finished destroying my financial future. The computer finished backing up at 10:30 p.m. I gathered more evidence than I'd imagined possible. Bank statements, loan documents, email correspondence with lenders, and even text messages between my parents discussing the Jake loans. I was replacing the final document when headlights swept across the window. They were home 2 hours early. I heard car doors slam. Then my mother's voice. I left my purse in the office. My blood turned to ice water. She was coming straight to where I was hiding. I grabbed the USB drive and dove behind the desk just as her footsteps reached the hallway. The office door opened, and light flooded the room. She moved around the desk, her footsteps stopping inches from my hiding spot. I held my breath until my lungs burned. "Strange," she murmured. "I thought I left it on the chair." Her footsteps retreated, the light clicked off, the door closed. I waited 10 minutes before crawling out, my entire body shaking. I'd gotten the evidence, but I'd also gotten careless. The filing cabinet was slightly open, papers were in wrong order, and the computer screen showed recent activity. They'd know someone had been searching. I learned that taking big risks sometimes pays off, but it also escalates the war to a new level. Monday morning, I received a text from my father. "We need to talk. Come home immediately." I knew they'd discovered my search. The evidence was secure with Marcus Webb, but my access to their house was about to end permanently. When I arrived, both parents were waiting in the living room with expressions I'd never seen before: cold, calculating, and dangerous. "Sit down," my father said. I remained standing. "We know you've been sneaking around our office," my mother began. "We found evidence of your break-ins." "I live here," I replied. "It's not breaking in, not anymore," my father said. "We're changing the locks today. You're no longer welcome in this house. We've also contacted the police about your stalking behavior," my mother added, "and we're filing for a restraining order to protect ourselves and Evan from your harassment." The words hit like physical blows. They were painting me as the criminal while destroying evidence of their own crimes. "I have evidence of what you did," I said. My father smiled coldly. "No, you have stolen documents and fabricated evidence that you obtained through illegal break-ins. We have security camera footage of your trespassing and computer forensic evidence of your attempts to hack our systems. That's not what happened. It's what the police report will say," my mother replied, "and what the restraining order will claim. You're a disturbed young man who's been harassing his family over imaginary financial crimes." I left that day with only my clothes and laptop. They'd turned the victim into the criminal with one conversation. Marcus Webb called that evening. "They're playing hardball," he said after I explained the situation. "But desperate criminals make bigger mistakes. The evidence we gathered is still valid, regardless of how we obtained it." Marcus suggested one final evidence-gathering mission. "Before going to law enforcement, we need to record them admitting to the loans, get them talking about the financial arrangements with Evan." I arranged a family dinner at a restaurant, claiming I wanted to apologize and reconcile. My parents agreed reluctantly, probably hoping to smooth things over before I involved authorities. I wore a wire provided by Marcus, a tiny recording device that connected to my phone. The plan was simple: get them talking about money, loans, and Evan's career funding. The dinner started cordially. Evan attended, looking tanned and confident from his Los Angeles lifestyle. He talked about upcoming modeling contracts and opportunities while I recorded every word. "It's amazing how quickly things have taken off," I said carefully. "The funding for everything must have been expensive." My father nodded. "We've invested heavily in Evan's future. It's worth it to see him succeed." "How much have you invested total?" I asked. That's when I realized I'd walked into a trap. Jake, my mother said softly, we know you're recording this conversation. My blood turned cold. What? Evan pulled out his own phone. I've been recording too actually. Dad thought you might try something like this. My father leaned forward. Son, you're attempting to entrap your own family into false confessions for crimes that never happened. We have you on tape trying to manipulate us into saying we took out loans in your name. But you did take out loans in my name, I protested. No, my mother said. We didn't, and now we have evidence of your harassment, your break-ins, your stalking behavior, and your attempts to entrap us with illegal recordings. The entire restaurant conversation had been scripted. They'd known about my plan and turned it against me. Your obsession with this fantasy has gone too far, my father continued. We're filing charges tomorrow morning for harassment, stalking, and attempted fraud. I left the restaurant feeling completely defeated. Every move I'd made had been anticipated and countered. They were 3 steps ahead of my amateur investigation, but Marcus Webb had been listening to the entire conversation through my wire. They just made their biggest mistake, he said when I called him afterward. They confirmed too much knowledge about your investigation methods. No innocent person knows that much about surveillance techniques. What do you mean? Your father knew you were wearing a wire before you said anything incriminating. How did he know? Because he's been monitoring your activities professionally. That's evidence of their counter-surveillance operation. Marcus Webb's professional investigation had been running parallel to my amateur efforts. While I was stumbling through obvious mistakes, he was building an airtight case. Your parents hired a private investigator to follow you, he explained during our emergency meeting. They've been documenting your activities to build a harassment case, but Pi surveillance creates records, and those records prove they knew about your investigation because they were guilty. He spread photographs across his desk. These show their Pi following you to my office, to the legal aid clinic, to the campus library where you researched identity theft laws. Innocent people don't hire professional surveillance. How did you get these photos? Professional courtesy among investigators. Your parents' Pi made the mistake of surveilling me too. That's when I knew we had them. Marcus had also completed his forensic analysis of the documents I'd photographed. Your signature was forged using a technique called pen lift analysis. The forger practiced your signature, but couldn't replicate your natural pen flow patterns. A handwriting expert can testify that these signatures are definitely fraudulent. What about the digital evidence? Even better, banking regulations require lenders to maintain digital records of all loan applications. I subpoenaed the electronic records directly from the banks. Your parents submitted applications from their home IP address using your personal information. The timestamps show you were in college classes when the applications were submitted. For the first time in months, I felt like victory was possible. We have enough evidence for prosecution, Marcus concluded, but I want to give them one chance to make this right before we involve law enforcement. The confrontation happened at Marcus' office. I'd requested a family meeting to resolve our differences, and they'd agreed, probably thinking they could manipulate me again. When they walked into the conference room and saw Marcus Webb, surveillance photos, and banking documents spread across the table, my father's face went pale. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, Marcus began formally. I'm a licensed private investigator, hired by your son, to investigate identity theft crimes. We have conclusive evidence that you've committed federal fraud using Jake's personal information. He methodically presented each piece of evidence: forged signatures, fraudulent loan applications, digital timestamps, financial records, and documentation of their counter-surveillance activities. The evidence is overwhelming, Marcus continued. You have 2 choices: voluntary restitution and cooperation, or federal prosecution for identity theft, mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy charges. My mother started crying. My father sat in stunned silence. How much restitution? He asked quietly. Full loan balances plus interest, credit repair costs, legal fees, and investigative expenses, total $247,000. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. We don't have that kind of money, my mother whispered. Then we proceed with prosecution, Marcus replied. Federal identity theft carries sentences of 15 to 30 years in prison. My father looked older than I'd ever seen him. What about Evan? He didn't know where the money came from. Evan's modeling career was funded entirely by stolen money, I said, speaking for the first time. Every headshot, every apartment payment, every designer outfit was bought with my stolen credit. The room fell silent except for my mother's crying. I want full restitution, I continued, plus public acknowledgement of what you did to me. The family needs to know the truth. My father nodded slowly. We'll liquidate everything: the house, the business, retirement accounts. It might take 6 months, but we'll pay it back. And Evan, I asked. Evan's career ends today, my father said. We're bringing him home. The restitution process took 8 months. My parents sold their house, liquidated investments, and used business assets to repay the stolen money. Evan returned home from Los Angeles. His modeling dreams ended as abruptly as they'd begun. The family gathering where they announced the truth was uncomfortable but necessary. Extended family members who'd dismissed my delusions sat in shocked silence as my father explained the systematic identity theft. "We destroyed Jake's credit and financial future to fund Evan's dreams," he said to the assembled relatives. "Everything Jake told you was true. We made him look crazy to cover our crimes." Several family members apologized to me afterward, though the relationships never fully recovered. Evan struggled with the revelation that his entire career had been built on stolen money. "I thought Dad was just supporting my dreams," he told me during one of our few conversations. "I didn't know he was destroying yours. Ignorance doesn't excuse the luxury apartments and designer clothes." I replied, "You never questioned where $50,000 a year came from." He had no answer. My parents aged dramatically during the restitution period. The stress of liquidating their life's assets, combined with guilt over their actions, left them looking defeated and frail. "We thought we were helping both our sons," my mother explained during one final conversation. "Evan with immediate support, and you by not burdening you with family financial problems. You were helping yourselves feel better about favoritism." I corrected. "Stealing my identity let you fund Evan's dreams while convincing yourselves you weren't destroying my future." The legal case never went to trial. Full restitution and public acknowledgement satisfied the district attorney's office. Though my parents remained on federal fraud monitoring for 5 years, my credit score recovered within 2 years, thanks to identity theft protections and professional credit repair. I graduated college debt-free thanks to the restitution money, and started my career with a clean financial slate. 2 years later, I'm working as a financial analyst for a forensic accounting firm, a career path directly inspired by my experience with family fraud. Rachel and I moved to Portland, far enough from family drama to build our own life. I speak occasionally at identity theft prevention seminars, sharing my story with other young adults. The most common question is always, "How did you forgive your family?" The answer is that I haven't. And probably never will completely. What they did wasn't a mistake or poor judgment, it was a calculated decision to destroy my financial future for their golden child's dreams. My parents now work multiple jobs to rebuild their retirement savings. Evan works at a retail job and lives in their small rental apartment. The modeling career ended permanently when the stolen funding disappeared. We exchange holiday cards and attend major family events, but the relationship remains cordial rather than close. Trust, once broken by identity theft, doesn't repair easily. The community response was mixed. Some people admired my persistence in seeking justice, while others felt I'd destroyed my family over money. The criticism stung initially, but I learned that many people prioritize family loyalty over personal justice. "You did the right thing," Marcus Webb told me during our final meeting. "Identity theft by family members only stops when there are real consequences. Your case will prevent them from victimizing future generations." He was right. My younger cousins now have parents who understand that family love doesn't excuse financial crimes. The experience taught me that justice sometimes requires destroying relationships to protect yourself. My parents chose their golden child over their other son, then chose criminal activity over financial responsibility. I chose my financial future over family loyalty. And I'd make the same choice again. Today, I have excellent credit, a successful career, and the satisfaction of knowing that family criminals faced consequences for their actions. My parents have each other, their diminished lifestyle, and the knowledge that their favoritism cost them everything. Sometimes justice isn't about forgiveness or reconciliation. Sometimes it's about making sure that destroying someone's life has consequences that match the crime. The loans are paid off, my credit is restored, and my parents learned that stealing your son's identity will cost you everything you've worked for. That lesson was worth $247,000 of their money to teach. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.